All right, everybody. We finished up in the last video talking about long-term potentiation and the actual physical changes that occur when a memory is passed on from short-term memory to long-term memory. And in this video, we're going to take a look at how emotions or stress may affect the ability to lay down a long-term memory. And one of the interesting things that researchers found along the way in identifying the effects of long-term potentiation, they found that when depressed patients with chronic and severe clinical depression were given electroconvulsive therapy or ECT, that process disrupted memories for recent experiences for those patients, but left most of their long-term memories intact. So another interesting thing happens then, concussion or a blow to the head can kind of do the same thing. And we see that the working memory has no time to consolidate those memories from the hippocampus to other areas of the brain to pass on that information to permanent storage in the cortex. Stress and emotions also have a pretty important effect on the ability to form those long-term memories. And we can see a couple different impacts that high levels of arousal can kind of sear in or brand in, if you will, memories into our brain. And those vivid, almost perfect recollections are called flashbulb memories. And we find that there's a couple areas of the brain that are really important. One of those areas that kind of fuels our ability to lay down memories for emotional events seem to be the amygdala. And the amygdala is this little processing area. I think we mentioned earlier at the end of the hippocampus and the temporal lobes. And those areas of the brain kind of clustered in the limbic system seem to boost the ability to lay down new memories. The result, highly emotional memories can enhance our ability to lay down the long-term memories, but then they can kind of disrupt our memories for kind of neutral events, events that aren't that important, that are also occurring, that we often typically automatically process. Information about space, time, and frequency, but that doesn't happen when our emotions are really high. And the rule of thumb here to remember with emotions is stronger emotions seem to lay down more reliable memories. And we'll talk about some tests there. And weaker emotions equal weaker memories. There does seem to be a slight difference in research between males and females in this case. I'll provide you with an article that talks a little bit about the difference that females are less likely to process those neutral memories, and males are a little bit better at that, but their emotional memories tend to not be quite as strong as female emotional memories, especially for negative emotional instances. So we also see the effects of drugs that mimic or prevent emotions from happening, and that those drugs seem to cause forgetting, that the emotional events don't last. Some drugs are some of the drugs I think we mentioned yesterday or in an earlier video, drugs like propranolol, given in a study to victims of either horrific car accidents or rapes or other traumatic events. Two groups, one, the experimental group, received the drug propranolol, which prevented the production of stress hormones, and a control group receiving a placebo. 9 weeks later, the subjects that received propranolol showed no signs of PTSD, and about 50% of the of the control group did show signs of PTSD. So we can see that drugs that affect hormones during stress can have an impact on how memories are formed. So the Flashbulb Memories in another study showed that people who actually experienced the emotional trauma of the event, the 9/11 attacks on the Pentagon and the World Trade Center, in longitudinal studies, 1 year later, 5 years later, and even 10 years later, had a much greater likelihood of remembering events as they reported them days later after the attacks. And that, on the other hand, which is a nice transition statement we can use in our FRQs, those who recall how they heard about the events of 9/11 were less likely 1, 5, and 10 years later to recall similarly to how they reported a couple days after the event. So people that actually experience emotional events are much more likely to remember them accurately later. So what about the effects? We know short-term stress and emotions can enhance. What about prolonged stress? Well, it seems that the opposite happens, that prolonged stress may kind of act as a neutralizing effect, as a corrosive agent in the hippocampus. People in prolonged combat or prolonged abusive situations, they can have a decreased accurate memory for those events, whereas sudden stress hormones increase memories, long-term stress hormones decrease our ability to remember. And the sudden appearance of stress can also cause our ability to remember previous memories or previously learned information. It can interfere with that. And we've all seen that on a class presentation, right? We're giving a presentation and we have high levels of stress and we kind of blank in front of the class because we can't remember. But when we leave class and later on, all those bits of information that we had studied kind of come back to us, almost as if we had a temporary amnesia. And amnesia does allow us to study the process of memory. Amnesia victims are, in many cases, like people with brain damage who can't remember faces and can't remember significant events from the past. Some of that conscious recall is destroyed, but not all of our memories are destroyed. A couple of very famous cases that we'll see videos of, Clive Waring and H.M. We'll see some video clips of these famous amnesiac patients. They kind of show us that the long-term memory storage is really more than one type of memory storage. because even though they might not be able to remember consciously events that have happened, they may still be able to remember skills and procedures they have learned. So we're going to stop there. And remember, you should be able to identify how stress may have an impact on our memory, and also how drugs might also impact our ability to remember events. So flashbulb memory, amygdala, hippocampus, some stress hormones like serotonin and glutamate would also be important to remember in this case. So be kind and rewind. And if you have any questions, I will talk to you in class. Thanks a lot.